Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan, MS Pearce. This is a US election special, and we're going to return to the Iowa incredible poll result that came out yesterday from Ann Selzer and the Des Moines Register. It is one of the, or she is, her polling outfit is one of the highest regarded pollsters in the US, has been incredibly successful in predicting results over the last 10 years and more. And she only polls in Iowa. So that's interesting in and of itself, a very particular, and there will be a context to that poll that might not be extrapolatable across the wider United States. And that poll ended up claiming that Harris is in the lead by 3 points against Trump, 47-44. And that showed a swing from Trump in 2020 and previously in 2016 of an incredible, I think it was 8.2 in 2020, and then was it 9.5 in 2016. So you've got a huge swing of sort of 11 points plus to Harris this time round, and a big swing from when they last did the poll in September as well. Now, lots of people have been reacting to this, saying, oh, this is amazing, it's a great thing since sliced bread for the Democrats. That means Democrats are going to absolutely romp it, and reading quite a lot into it that's pro-Democrat. And then you've got pro-Republicans saying, this is rubbish, it's a fake poll. I had so many people on my threads last night when I broke the news of this poll saying it's a fake poll. It's like, what does that mean? Is this a poll that you don't like the results of? How is it fake? Because she's released her methodology. It's very clear, her methodology, and actually it's a data point that we need to explain. So this is 808 people. Actually, that's been derived down from more than that, so 1,038, I think, people or something like that, derived down or cut down to 808 as they take into account weighting and whatnot. She does it in a particular way. It's quite a simple poll, actually, compared to some very complex polling techniques that other pollsters do, and possibly that's a strength there, that there aren't. What she does is she looks forward, and she says, in fact, if we go to an interview with her, I was going to play it from the beginning here, but actually she talks about this simplicity of her polling and looking forward rather than looking back. Which is what some other pollsters do, is they look into previous elections to try and then read that into the present data. And she's like, no, this is about looking at the data now and looking forward. So here's what Ann Selzer herself says about the poll and where she might be differentiated from other pollsters.
Well, and please, I am grateful to have clients who we work intimately together. They know my method, they know my history, and so the Des Moines Register had every right to say this is too far off. Nobody will believe it. We're going to can it, but they don't.
Right.
And I think they think like I think, is we've taken our very best shot at what we think is what's true out there. I don't. We've tweaked a little bit here and there. There's things that we decided that's a corner cut that we don't want to do, and so I don't lie in bed thinking I wish we'd done something different. So that, it doesn't mean I'm not nervous about whether my poll will be good or not good. As for other people's methodology, to be honest, that's the first thing I go looking for when a poll is published by anybody, is to see what it is that they're doing. I've kept my mouth quiet about this idea of waiting to the previous recalled vote. So how did people vote in 2020? I have a lot of questions about how that would work out actually arithmetically, but I have talked about my method as polling forward. And so what I want is my data to reveal to me without favor what this future electorate looks like. So when I hear people saying, well, we're trying to figure out what this future electorate looks like, and I kind of think to myself, why bother? It's how could you? And if you're looking at the past to say that's what the future is going to look like, to me, that's polling backward.
Yeah.
So you're doing something that will give you results that look like 2020, perhaps. I want results that look like 2024.
I was listening.
That's a really interesting point there. So take that into the analysis that we're going to go through here. Now, okay, this is either an outlier. Basically, if you extrapolate this across the United States, Kamala Harris absolutely romps to victory because that kind of swing is huge. You know, here someone says 2024 election results of every state shifts as much as the Selzer poll thinks Iowa did. Uh, and that's unlikely because, of course, there are particular contexts to this poll. And we'll get on to one of the main ones, which is the abortion question. That is very particular to Iowa due to a ruling that came out during the summer. And so, therefore, that is affecting Iowa in a way that it won't affect other states. But there are certainly lessons that we can, or indicators that I think we can observe from Iowa that should be important for how we understand what's going on in the US at the moment. And when we look at the behavior of female voters, of you can slice and dice the demographics into sort of white, female, age, sort of older females are an important voting segment in Iowa. You've got farmers. Tariffs are going to hit the farmers in Iowa particularly hard. People aren't massively fans of tariffs, although Trump at his rallies talks about tariffs 100, 200, 400, 500, 2,000%, and people cheer him. And then you get his surrogates talking about how wonderful tariffs are. Actually, farmers were hit with tariffs last time round in the previous Trump administration, so that could be affecting things. I don't know how much, but you know, it's easy to get carried away with this. So it's either an outline and it's just wrong, but actually you've still got to you still got to deal with the data itself. You can't just say it's wrong. So you could say it's anomalous, but then there's still that sample size. It's a fairly decent sample size of 808. That's pretty good. And it fits in with lots of other data points that we're seeing, most notably actually in that general geographic region as well. So let's have a look at a couple of sources here. Heath Mayo says, consider Ann Selzer would have to be off by almost 10 points here for Trump to match his 2020 performance in the state, and he still lost that election. So the margin of error was 3.4 points for this poll. And in order for this poll to be what Trump needs to get, or the sort of result that Trump would want and expect Iowa to be, it would have to be wrong not by 3.4 points, but by 10 points. So you would have to get almost 3 times the margin of error for this poll to be just, you know, wrong, right? It has to be like nuts wrong for the Republicans to be able to justifiably dismiss this. So I think it's incumbent upon naysayers of this poll to bring up better justification than it's just wrong or it's an outlier. Now, it can be an outlier, it can be anomalous. These things happen. Well, that's how statistics works. You know, you could just flukily get a bunch of people in this poll that just so happen to answer in a way that benefits Harris, but actually the reality is you just flukily got the right kind of people there. But again, that's why you look at all these other data points, see whether it fits in with what we are seeing elsewhere and in other contexts. It's also worth noting form. Like, her form is really good. Her polling is really good. She's never been off by more than 5 points. So 10 points would be double her worst ever polling result. So again, if you're someone that's going to troll the threads with fake poll, it's an outlier. It's rubbish. There was an Emerson College poll that was Trump plus 10. Like, okay, Emerson College is not as good a pollster. They use their own subjective weighting in a way that actually she doesn't. It's a lot more kind of simpler, cleaner polling that she does. Matthew Dowd says, folks, I'm not saying the Selzer poll in Iowa is accurate with Harris up 3, but there has been various shifts in the Midwest red states of serious movement to Harris. So again, like, this is abducted reasoning. Inference is the best explanation. So either it's completely wrong, or it's not wrong. And when we look at all these other data points, we can put it into the, well, that leads us to believe we can put that in the it's wrong pot or it's right pot, essentially. I mean, we can be that binary about this. So when you look at other data points and you say, okay, how do we explain or how do we understand these data points in the context of the Ann Selzer poll? You got, okay, the Midwest red states, there have been serious movements towards Harris. I reported recently that Kansas was only 5, Trump plus 5. Now, that is a huge shift towards the Democrats. That's what we're seeing in Iowa. Down 3 in Ohio. That is much closer than expected. That would support the idea that Ann Seltzer's poll is actually somewhat correct. She's up 12. Harris is up 12 in Nebraska's 2nd district. That is a massive victory for Harris there. And so on and so forth. So I think, okay, we're building up a justification for believing that the poll is somewhat correct. Okay, then we've got moving on to a different subject concerning this poll. Let's look at the reaction to the poll from the Republican side, and we can go to Trump himself, who says this.
But it's now or never. This is it. This is the moment. We've been waiting 9 years for this, and we got 2 days, and we got all this crap going on with the press and with the fake stuff and fake polls. And by the way, the polls are just as corrupt as some of the writers back there.
So the idea that polls are great, well, like when the polls were good for him, he was like, polls are great, we're up in the polls, and he was talking about this whole time. Because he's looking at Trafalgar polls and Atlas Intel polls and Rasmussen polls. Yeah, polls are great, and then when a poll isn't great, it's like, it's a corrupt poll, it's a fake poll. It's like, double standard. Those other ones weren't corrupt. So it's this cherry picking. Now, I'm not cherry picking this to say, look at this and ignore the others. But I'm saying, how do we explain the difference between these polls? Like, something's going on. We can just go, polls. Those are corrupt. Those are good. And just the ones that I hate are corrupt and the ones that I like are good. No, okay. Let's be a bit more cleverer about this and say, okay, why do we have a bunch of polls over here that have been skewing towards Trump? What's been going on there? It turns out that all of those polls were funded by the Republicans and they've got the herd. And in fact, she talks about this, Ann Selzer herself, about the herd theory that's been proposed about pollsters not wanting to split away from the herd, which is exactly what she has done. She's like, I don't really care. I don't care what you guys think. I've been accurate all these times and I'm doing what I always do, and this is what I found. Like it or lump it. Whereas other pollsters are like, ooh, we need to think about who's funding our next polls and blah, blah, blah. And that's what she's talking about. The Des Moines Register, I've got a client, the Des Moines Register, the local newspaper, who's like, doesn't matter what I say, they're still going to be my client because they've got trust in me. Where these other people are like, well, if we say something that's not, if we're a Republican pollster and we say something that's pro Harris, that shows Harris doing well, then actually we might not get funding for our next polls from the Republicans. And so that can go to explaining why there's a difference between these data points, etc., and herd mentality and so on and so forth. And all these things proposed. And I've talked previously about how Republican pollsters in the last month, it was like Republican pollsters over 26 and there's one Democratic pollster, 26 ratio 26-1. You're wondering why the averages are looking pro-Republican. Well, actually, with a ratio of 26-1, and then you've got sort of 35 non-partisan polls, but you're going to skew the whole average if overwhelmingly you have more Republican pollsters than Democratic pollsters. There you go. So that can explain why you've got, these other polls. So he has so often given great respect and adulation to the polls and saying, oh, we're up in the polls, we're number one in the polls, we're winning in all the polls. And then as soon as the poll doesn't show what he likes, he's like, it's a fake poll, it's a corrupt poll.
They can make those polls sing. They can make them sing. They brag about it. I got a poll, I'm 10 points up in Iowa. One of my enemies just puts out a poll, I'm 3 down. So
now he's calling Ann Selzer an enemy. Like, did he call her an enemy when she was when the result was pro-Republican, when she was accurately predicting previous Republican wins. That this is really
Jody
problematic.
Ernst called me. Everyone's called me. They said, "You're killing it, Iowa. The farmers love me, and I love them." But they came up. They just announced a fake poll. Hey, think of it. Right before the election, that I'm 3 points down. I'm not down in Iowa. I got $28 billion for the farmers. $28 billion. Nobody else would have gotten 10 cents. Joe would sleep. Do you think he thinks about the farmers? And you know who gave me the $28 billion for the farmers? China, because China screwed our farmers. And then they tell me I'm down in Iowa.
I think he's referring to the fact that he put tariffs on and then realised that farmers were getting screwed over and had to give them handouts precisely because of his own tariff regime. And the farmers were going mental because the tariffs were completely hurting them. That's what I was talking about earlier. But he remembers that as, the farmers love me because I gave them all these handouts. Yeah, but you gave them handouts because you screwed them over.
I think so. And you know what? A good poll, Emerson, no friend of mine, they said that poll is wrong. Everybody said, why do they announce a poll?
They didn't say that poll was wrong. They had a poll that just concluded differently. Emerson didn't come out and say that poll is wrong.
That's highly skewed toward Democrats and liberals. Why do they do that? When you read it, they interviewed far more Democrats than they did Republicans. Why do they do that? Why do they do that? And I guess there's a law that they have to say that because they would have preferred not having to say that.
And he's just talking absolute nonsense. We can go and look at the methodology in a second. Let's just listen to him again.
He's right. Well, there's a lot of spirit here, And we even have the polls up, but I think it's much more than the polls. No, the polls, I'm telling you, you can make those suckers sing. You get the right pollster, you can do, and you really do inflict damage, when you do like this person from Iowa. Today, the election essentially is really, we're talking Turkey, comes out with a poll different from every other poll because it wasn't even in question. It's really the opposite way. I'm way up. If you look at 3-4 months ago, Dan, I was losing states that now are walks. They're now walks, and I think you could have that here. It's called suppression. They suppress, and it actually should be illegal because it's, in many ways, it's worse than the written word, which these guys do quite well, actually.
And it's just, absolute nonsense. It's just word salad garbage. Like, I can't believe people still think, like, Kamala Harris is, I was arguing with my mate the other day. It's like, yeah, but Kamala, a British guy, down a pub, is like, yeah, but Kamala Harris is just word salad. It's like, who are you listening to? Have you, I've literally listened to hundreds of hours of Kamala Harris speaking. And yet, when she's free flowing, it's not going to be as on point as her scripted answers. But to think that she's word salad and he's not, and sometimes you don't know what he's talking about. You can't follow his thread. It's just like you are listening to a complete echo chamber. And I know the guy, and he is, and you could say the same for me, but actually I've listened to both of them and I've heard hundreds of hours of both of these people. I'm like, he's word salad and she is on point so much more often. Anyway, as you can see there, he's then going on to, they should be suppressed, it should be illegal. So a poll that doesn't conclude how he likes should be suppressed and should be illegal. And that's deeply problematic.
Fighting so hard to steal this damn thing. Look at what's going on. Look at what's going on in your state. Every day, they're talking about extending hours and stuff. Who ever heard of this stuff? We should have one-day voting and paper ballots.
Which is really interesting because he's been campaigning massively to get the Republicans back to early voting. And there's been some great success, which is why you have seen Republicans return to some traditional ideas about getting out to vote early in places where they used to do that. Of course, the pandemic sort of screwed everything up, but it's looking like he's actually successfully got Republicans to get out an early vote in this election, and you're likely to see a big shift for Democrats in some of these early voting states a big shift back to Democrats on election day. Pennsylvania might be an example of that. And then you're wondering whether he'll use that as rationale for believing that there's cheating going on, etc., etc.
Then I just heard that a couple of states may go an extra 12 days. How the hell do you have an election? You know, they spend all of this money on these damn machines, and paper ballots, you'd have the answer by 9 o'clock tonight. It's damn...
You'd have the answer by 9 o'clock. How many people are counting those paper ballots? Like, to get the answer by 9 o'clock, you have to count them by machine. Unless you want 1 million people counting ballots.
It's a damn shame, and I'm the only one that talks about it because everyone's afraid to damn talk about it. And then they accuse you of being a conspiracy theorist. These are conspiracy, and they want to lock you up. They want to put you in jail. The ones that should be locked up are the ones that cheat on these horrible elections that we go through in our country. And I don't know what's going to happen, but for future elections, I won't be even a part of it. But you ought to damn well go to paper ballots. You ought to go to voter ID. And you ought to have the election over by 9 o'clock. I'm hearing now they're going to take weeks.
He's just like sounding off like an angry old demented man. Anyway, yeah, so, you know, it should be illegal. Polls will look bad for him, etc., etc. Okay, so then you've got David Sachs here, he's one of the tech bros. You've got David Sachs, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, these South African billionaires that are super pro-Trump. He's like, 2016, Trump wins Iowa 9.4. 2020, Trump wins Iowa 8.2. 2024, Emerson shows Trump up 9. There's no chance Trump loses Iowa. Anyone telling you different is running an op. So this is in answer to Ann Selzer's poll. But like, it's not that Trump's going to lose Iowa necessarily, but there's data here that we need to explain, and it's just very easy to go, oh, it's a fake poll, it's corrupt, or anyone telling you any different is blah 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 blah. It's just no, like, and apparently, so I hear, the Trump team is panicking behind the scenes about this poll because it is about what it tells you. Like, what are the worries? It's not necessarily the case that Iowa is going to go Democrat. I think that would be insanely amazing if it did for Harris, because I think that would be a landmark state result. But you know, something is happening in Iowa, and something needs explaining. And as she said on this podcast with Tim Miller, she says later on, yeah, my methodology seems way too simple, but it's worked so far. One day it might not work, and then I'll be blown into little pieces and scattered across the city of Des Moines. She's absolutely great, but she says it, you know, how it is. Now, let's actually look at her results and how she explains them, and see what she has to say.
What you saw is happening in the poll, and then we'll kind of go through the particulars.
I don't think anybody would look at the numbers and not be, you know, in a somewhat state of shock. We started interviewing Monday night, so Tuesday morning I walked in, my assistant was already crunching numbers, and she said, did you see the unweighted data? I go, yeah, I'd like to see the weighted data. Yeah. So we're always very cautious about embracing things too much. I'm always telling my clients, don't get married to these numbers because they can change. But all they did was confirm what we were seeing in the unweighted data after Monday night, that Harris was in the lead in Iowa. And that was, nobody in their right mind would predict it. Our methodology is to make no assumptions, and we made no assumptions, and here we are.
Yeah, I mean, quite a remarkable change from your poll over the early summer that had President Biden down 18, to a poll in September that had it significantly closer to this one. Like, what are you seeing as having been the impetus for such a dramatic turnaround?
You know, I can't give you a data-driven answer, which would be my preference.
Sure.
What it seems like, given that just this morning we released the findings from the congressional races, and we are now showing 2 Iowa districts tilting toward the Democratic candidate, and that includes a big lead.
So there are 6 electoral college votes in Iowa. Now, just to remind you how electoral college votes get made up, because the popular vote in the US does not win you a presidential election, right? We had in 2016 Trump get in, even though Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by over 2 million people. She got 2 million plus more votes than Trump, but still lost the election. It's because it depends where you get those votes, and each state has 2 electoral college votes per state, and that's a portion. That's because each state has 2 senators. You have 2 senators, and then for the number of representatives. So remember, you get 100 senators, 50 states, 100 senators in Congress. So you get the Senate, 100 senators, and then you get 400, and it depends what the census is and what have you, because then on the census you get apportioned a certain amount of representatives in the House of Representatives, that lower house, 400 and whatever it is at the moment, 438 is it, something like that. You have these representatives that are apportioned by population. So in Iowa, you have a population whereby they get 4 representatives and 2 senators. So they got 6 Congress people. And that gives them the electoral college's vote. So they have 6 votes that go into the pot. Because those 2, every state gets 2 senators, the smaller your state, the less diluted those senators become. So actually, this is how the electoral college system benefits Republicans generally, because going back to what I was saying in my earlier video that you may have seen about Maya Sandu getting the Moldovan vote, and talking previously about how rural areas generally skew to the right and urban areas skew to the left. You have smaller states like sort of Montana, Alaska, Iowa, places like that. Those 2 Senate seats that are less diluted amongst the electoral college votes, or basically skews towards Republicans, and other reasons as well. But anyway, that's a digression. So there are these 4 representatives from Iowa, along with the 2 senators, and they previously were all Republican, and her results have shown that 2 of them are now, at least according to her results, actually looking like being Democrats. So that's a significant shift.
In the first district, which is 53 to 37. And that district in particular has the driving issue, from what I read, has been the abortion issue. And it was over the summer that Iowa's 6-week ban on abortion went into effect after all the court challenges were taken care of. So that's the decision being made, the law going into force, and then people living with it for a while, and it being a strong, sort of compelling thing from Iowa's in the congressional districts. Iowa right now, all 4 congressional districts are held by Republicans. So
Yeah.
to me, it seems like to a certain extent there's something organic going on, because the presidential candidates certainly aren't spending any money or time here. And it may be, in fact, that these.
In other words, this swing is not to do with ad buys, and particularly, they're not campaigning in Iowa, either candidates, either nominees. So this is, as she says, an organic thing that is happening in the context probably of a harsh abortion law and a mobilization of the female vote.
These congressional races are driving the presidential race toward the Democrat.
I want to get into the congressional races a little deeper, but just a couple other things at the presidential level first. The gender gap is particularly noteworthy, and you look at independent women, older women in particular. Talk about what you found on that, and which obviously could also speak to the abortion question.
Right. Well, the pollsters who work with contests that are going to be decided by a gender gap typically say you need to win with women more than you lose with men. And we're seeing that in these data right now. So men are 52-38 for Trump, but the margin is wider, 56-36, a 20-point gap with women for Harris.
Now, if you're going to take this poll and do any kind of extrapolation, that's the kind of data point that's important and interesting, which is that, yeah, men are skewing towards Trump, but women are skewing towards Harris to a greater degree than men are skewing towards Trump. That is why I think Harris will win, and it will be on account of women across America and young people as well. So we're getting some huge young turnouts going on, as well as really significant female turnout as well, and they have been heavily mobilized. Just there was a young oh no, I don't have it here. No, but anyway, young people are turning out big time as well, and I think this is a sort of data point that is important for the rest of the US. Although, again, it might have a lot to do with the particular ruling in Iowa, but of course, those kind of laws have also been passed in a number of other states, and you could get a similar reaction in those states as well.
The gap for women age 65 and over, and this, the age 65 and over group, I've been watching this whole cycle because they, in past cycles, have tilted more Republican, but now they are strongly tilted toward Harris, and the margin among women 65 and over is more than 2-1. It's 63-28.
More than 2 to
Wow.
1.
Again, that's sort of
63-28. So 28 times 2 is 56. 63 to 28. So that is over 2 to 1. And that's a huge number of older women in this poll that are skewing towards Kamala Harris. Now, is that something that we are seeing elsewhere? I've seen a lot of anecdotal evidence that that is the case. I've seen a lot of testimonies from older women and younger women in a way that I haven't seen those testimonies with that kind of emotion and enthusiasm for Trump at all. I see some at rallies where you get people interviewed, but in terms of testimonies after voting, being super emotional about what they've done, about voting for a woman, about voting for reproductive rights, about Roe v. Wade, about Dobbs, etc., I think you've got a massive impetus for women of all ages, but as you can see here, particularly older women who have gone through. So as this source says, my biggest takeaway from Iowa poll, women 65 plus, the ones who lived in America before Roe, before women could even have their own bank accounts, know exactly what Trump and Republicans are promising. They know the stakes, and they're going more than 2 to 1 for Harris. So I think that is a data point that is incredibly important.
of a jaw-dropping number.
Yeah, I wonder. Did you get? I didn't actually look at this. Is there? Do you do a religion crosstab? Like, is it?
Yeah, and she goes on to say that evangelicals stay pretty much solid for Trump there. Now, other key findings in the Iowa poll: independent women back Harris by a 28-point margin, 57 to 29. So you've got your independents really skewing, at least independent women skewing for Harris. And remember, women are more likely, I think, to vote than men in general. Higher propensity voters. Senior women support her by more than 2 to 1, as we heard. 97% of Democrats support Harris, while only 89% of Republicans support Trump. Now, this is one of the other data points that is massively important. And you might put some of it down to that summer abortion ruling. But in general, we are seeing this in crosstabs and other surveys. And this is a question I've been asking the whole time, which is, what is the leakage of Republicans to Democrats compared to Democrats to Republicans? And virtually all Democrats voted for Harris or intend to vote for Harris as according to this survey. And actually a significant number, more than 3, almost 4 times as many Republicans are voting for Harris as opposed to Trump. So that leakage away from your registered party is 4 times to the benefit of the Democrats. That is huge. The question is that able to be extrapolated across onto other states, as we see it here in Iowa? Huge finding there. Now, the Des Moines Register itself has a very good article on this that I think is well worth reading. And you can go and check that out. If I was to disable my ad blocker here, we could actually look at some of these data points. But I think it's really interesting this the metadata that you get out of this Des Moines Register poll. So yeah, leading 47 to 44. Poll shows that women, particularly those who are older or are politically independent, are driving the late shift towards Harris. Trump continues to lead with his core base of support: men, evangelicals, rural residents, and those without college degrees. That, to me, sums up this is everything I've been talking about, which is the shift toward the greater shift towards the Democrats for college-educated men and women, and white and all the different demographics there, demographics. But yeah, Trump is very good at shoring up his base: men, evangelicals, rural residents. Talked about that previously, and those without college degree. But it appears that Harris has been increasing in, say, white women, women with college degrees, men with college degrees as well. She's taking those at a higher rate than she's losing certain demographics here and there. So the idea that she's losing black men, she's not really. I mean, she's just not gaining them as much as it in previous. She's losing them compared to previous elections in certain areas, but actually some people are questioning whether that is actually really happening. And the reality is she's losing that larger percent of a smaller slice of the pie is less important than a smaller percent of a larger slice of the pie in the case of gaining white college educated voters. So anyway, the analysis here in the Des Moines Register article is fascinating, and you can go and look at all of the deets there. Interesting stuff. Let's just look at this one. Independents, absolutely favouring, or at least independent women favouring Harris. So in 2020, the Register's Iowa poll showed that Biden and Trump were tied among all likely voters in September, but the final poll before Election Day showed independents breaking for Trump, and he ultimately won by 8 percentage points over Biden. That's 2020. This year, independents appear to be turning the other way toward Harris, a move fueled by growing support among independent women. Independent likely voters who have supported Trump in every other Iowa poll this year now favour Harris 46 to 39. Now independent women choose Harris 57 to 29, and that's up from September when independent women gave her just a 5-point lead. And now she's got a huge, it's almost double 29, it's 28-point lead, up from 5 points. Wow. Independent men still favour Trump 47 to 37, numbers that are largely unchanged from September when independent men supported Trump 46 to 33. Overall, Harris still holds a 20-point lead with women 56 to 36, as we've already heard. So just really interesting analysis going on there. As this source says, Zach from Ohio, either and Selzer found 808 of the most insane Iowan voters to poll, or the late undecideds breaking to Harris by double-digit anecdotes we keep hearing are real. And this is what I've said a number of times, is that I've seen so many anecdotes that at some point those anecdotes have to be actual data points. Whereby, if I'm seeing all of these anecdotes of people saying, I'm a registered Republican, I'm now going to vote Democrat, or I'm a woman and I'm really enthused by it, or scared by it, or empowered by it, etc., at some point those have to tell you something when you don't see them go the other way. Now, is there selection bias from the sorts of outlets that I look at? Possibly. That could certainly be the case, but I've not seen them even with the people that are on my feeds. I get an awful lot of right wingers on my feeds as well, thanks to Elon Musk. But actually, it's useful to keep an eye on what everyone is claiming, and I just don't see this wealth of testimonies from people who have voted saying, I voted for Trump, I'm really happy, thank you very much. Whereas I see just absolutely tons of other people. I saw a 77-year-old Floridian woman today doing her first ever TikTok video, and she was like almost breathless with excitement for having voted for Harris and voted blue all the way down the ticket. And that's the sort of thing that makes me, if it was on its own, it's meaningless. But if it's in the context of all these other videos that are very similar, then actually you start thinking there is this movement, particularly of women, towards Harris that I think is meaningful, and that's what supported in or supports the data in this Iowa poll as well. Yeah. So what else? Rachel Bitterkofer, who is often called the election whisperer, she says you don't run on the issue most important to voters whose imaginations begin and end on the economy every cycle. Instead, you force what will make you win onto the public agenda. Team Kamala executed it perfectly. So, a majority of likely Kamala Harris voters in Iowa say they've been thinking most about the future of democracy when making their choice for president. So, likely voters in Iowa said their preferred candidate was Kamala Harris. They were asked which one of the following have you been thinking about most in your decision to vote to support Kamala Harris? 51% of future of democracy. So this idea that Trump is the threat to democracy is playing on these voters' minds, right? 51% are saying the future of democracy is their biggest thing. 22% is abortion. So although I've just been talking about how important that abortion law is in Iowa to driving the vote towards Harris, actually the future of democracy appears to be more important. What you might have is the people who have switched, or those independents might be finding that abortion is a big thing. But I think also the idea that Trump has been saying all sorts of things that appear to be fairly anti-democratic, I think is a problem. And then other things, when you've got the economy way down 7%, so on and so forth. I think that's an interesting result there. Now, then you start thinking, well, okay, can we extrapolate that to other states? And you look at here, we've got a letter from doctors in Texas who are literally begging for the laws to change so that women stop dying. These are Texas OBGYN, so gynecologists, releasing a letter after news of the deaths of Gisele Barniker and Nevaeh Crane as a result of the Texas abortion ban. So you've got all these doctors writing a letter to the officials and policymakers in Texas. This is a really big mobilizer, I think, of the female electorate. And when you've got doctors writing a letter like this, and you've now got Ted Cruz having got controversial views on reproductive rights, and you've got Colin Allred, coming up and overtaking him in some polls in Texas, and you've got some pretty interesting rumors coming out of Texas that actually it could flip, or at least they could lose a Senate. The Republicans could lose a Senate seat there. It's going to be driven by issues like this, which we see in Iowa. Can we take something from Iowa and apply that to Texas? And then you see something like this. Now, this is just an anecdote. This is just a picture of someone voting. But for me, this means something, right? You've got someone dressed up in, Handmaid's Tale outfit, as if this is Gilead, right? Voting at this is in Asheville in North Carolina, right? Which is a fascinating place. And there's some interesting data coming out of North Carolina as well, which is looking good for the Democrats. But this is incredibly powerful. So why is she dressed like that? Abortion, reproductive rights. So women, high propensity voters in general. As I keep saying, I think women and young people might well win this election for Kamala Harris. And then you have this. So local news report from Waukesha County, quote, abortion was the number one issue with every single woman we talked to and some of the men. Wow. And what's interesting about that place is, as I reported the other day, it's the mayor, or is it the governor? The mayor of Waukesha County is a Republican, has endorsed Kamala Harris. Yes, anecdote, but we have these trends that are going on all over the place when it concerns female votes or intentions to vote. and abortion, reproductive rights. Again, I think this is incredibly important, and I think a groundswell in females coming out to vote is going to help the Democrats. And I think this could be a scenario whereby women and young people win for Kamala Harris. If she does win, it will be down to largely to that, I think. But let me know what you think. That's me revisiting the Iowa poll. Should I dwell this long on a single poll? It's up to you to decide whether it's worthwhile, but I think there's things that we can learn for that, and we can look at how people deal with this. And you can bury your head in the sand and say fake poll, outlier, or whatever, or you can say, is it an outlier, and why is it an outlier? Why have they got this data sample? Why have they got the sample that says this? You can just ignore it, or you can say, what's going on here? Why does this say this and those ones say that? Can we explain that difference? What does it tell us about how people might be voting both in Iowa but actually around the country as well? Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care and speak to you soon.